What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today we're talking about my 2023 award-winning picks predictions, just kind of who I think should win these individual awards. And it's been a fun regular season. We're now into the postseason. You're seeing this on Monday, so as I'm recording this, playoff football hasn't happened yet. So if any of these takes become outdated pretty quick, I do apologize, but going out of town this week, so we got to work ahead. But nonetheless, these are regular season awards, so that's really what we're bearing all this merit off of. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'll also make mention to my preseason picks, because I actually did get 3 of these correct in my preseason video, and I'll make sure I put that somewhere up here at the top of your screen, so that way you can actually believe me when I say that. So let's go ahead and start talking about comeback player of the year. And sorry, I am covering up Christian McCaffrey. This screen and the next one will be the only time I cover up someone's name, but Christian McCaffrey comes in at 3rd, Saquon at 2. To me, it's Geno as the winner. And I get some of the criticism some people will levy against this. It's like, come back from what? Being, a backup? Well, yeah, you came back from, irrelevancy in a lot of ways, So he earned himself a starting job, and he played really, really well this year. And he's a huge reason why. He is the reason why, in my opinion, that and then this draft class for why Seattle's in this playoff. I predicted the Seahawks to be a 4-win team. Geno taking a step forward and having a career year, and then the draft class John Schneider put together. I did not do executive of the year, but Snyder would be my runner-up right behind Howie Roseman. Both those guys, I think, a huge reason for their team's respective success. But yeah, I want to give a ton of credit here to Geno Smith. He was a fun player to watch this year in and of itself. Also, led the NFL in games with 2+ touchdowns this year. Fun fact there. Saquon was great. He was a huge reason why the Giants were in the playoffs, right? Brian Daboll was scrapping at the bone to try to find any sort of way to move the ball, and Saquon was a huge reason why. And Christian McCaffrey was pretty good in Carolina, and then he goes to San Francisco, and he's kind of the thing that's put him over the top. And I think a huge reason why they've been able to survive the Brock Purdy experiment or experience, if you will, even going into the playoffs. So ton of credit for what Christian McCaffrey's done, both as a runner but also as a pass catcher. Great again in Carolina, but also a standout player. One of the best reasons or best things San Francisco has working in their favor. Again, this might sound outdated depending on how Saturday plays out, but nonetheless, let's go ahead and move on to offensive rookie of the year. Garrett Wilson's going to be my winner here. This one's close. I'm covering up Kenneth Walker the third. He'll come in 3rd. A little bit of a slower start to the year. Didn't get to see him a whole lot early. Then he also had the injury once he was in the lineup. But, dude, he was awesome to watch this year. And another big reason why the Seahawks are so good. And, again, credit to John Schneider. This really came down to Olave versus Wilson for me. And if you got Olave over Wilson, I don't blame you. I think Olave, from start to finish, like week in and week out, was probably the better player. But Garrett Wilson's big games were awesome. And I think the reason we didn't see Garrett Wilson consistently, make an impact like Olave is quarterback play. I mean, Andy Dalton, give him all the flack you will, he actually had a pretty decent year, and he was consistently peppering Olave with targets. Meanwhile, when Garrett Wilson had Joe Flacco, like in that Cleveland game, first 4 weeks of the year, I think it was week 3, week 4, he put up gaudy numbers, and that's with Joe Flacco. And then you got Mike White in there, and then his numbers start to explode. He had like this 3-game stretch of just going absolutely bananas, a huge reason why I made the playoffs in a couple of my fantasy leagues. So maybe this is also bias here, me trying to give back to Garrett Wilson where he gave to me, but I do think the highs were higher for Garrett Wilson. You take away those Zach Wilson games where he was, I don't want to say non-existent, he was still part of the offense, but he was hampered by QB play and Zach Wilson just not being it, then yeah, I think once you bake that in, Garrett Wilson was the best rookie this year on the offensive side. But if you take Chris Olave, I won't blame you. And I actually have the Jets coming away with a clean sweep here when it comes to Rookie of the Year awards. Sauce Gardner, to me, is a top 5 corner in the league, as is. Not top 5 young player, not up-and-coming corner, not top 5 rookie, top 5 corner in the league. He's a stud. We got to see him match up against very different types of wide receivers this year. And, at this end of the year stretch, he had to see DK Metcalf one week and then Tyreek Hill the next. And Tyreek was a little gimpy with the ankle, but 2 very different receivers, and he more than held his own. So I think Sauce is a force to be reckoned with moving forward in his career. Aiden Hutchinson comes in at number 2. I did give him the bump over Tariq Woolen. I think his end of the year was a lot more impressive than Tariq Woolen. Not to say Woolen was a disappointment or just abysmal at the end of the year, but a lot of his interception production came early. Meanwhile, Aiden Hutchinson as a pass rusher took him a little bit of time, but man, especially in that Green Bay game, Week 18, he was a huge reason why the Lions went into halftime with a lead. And then also you did get those interception productions. That one on the sidelines, kind of a fluke play. It's just, I guess, how they drew it up, baiting, the quarterback into the throw. I forgot who the Lions were playing that week, but and then, getting his hands up at the defensive at the line of scrimmage. That's not going to happen every year, but you see the success J.J. Watt, Carlos Dunlap have had about being able to get their hands up, bat passes. For Aiden Hutchinson, these became interceptions this year, so I will bake that in a little bit, but that's why I gave Hutchinson the edge over Tariq Woolen here. But to me, without a doubt, Sauce Gardner, the most impressive defensive rookie we saw this year. Now let's get into the stretch of things I got right in my preseason, not even my in-season. I did do one of these in-season, but my preseason Offensive Player of the Year was Justin Jefferson, and I'm glad to say I think he is absolutely the pick here. Tyreek Hill is, the honorable mention here. He was great, but I do think that ankle injury kind of hampered his stats towards the end of the season, and those games without Tua kind of held him back as well. But that being said, Justin Jefferson's the reason the Vikings are as good as they are, right? I've said this multiple times on my channel, so I do apologize if you're hearing this again. But just like how defenses this year are starting to use stunts and twists across the defensive line at a higher rate, and they're finding a way to steal a 1% edge and create some pass rush, I think the Vikings, like the Rams last year, have been able to steal an edge back on the offensive side by just peppering their number one guy with more and more targets until you find that line of demarcation where it loses its efficiency. I think you keep doing it, right? Like, there was a stretch towards the end of the season where Justin Jefferson had 46 targets in 3 games. At this point, like, number one targets, instead of seeing 10, targets a game, maybe 12, I think that number should be right around 15. So, the Rams last year, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, obviously the OC for LA on their Super Bowl run. They did that a lot with Cooper Kupp. Let's try to find a way where we can get him 15 targets. And that carried over in Kevin O'Connell's first year in Minnesota, trying to get 15 or so targets a game, it felt like, for Justin Jefferson, trying to get him the ball any and all opportunities. So, defenses are utilizing stunts and twists and generating pass rush and stealing 1%. I think Kevin O'Connell's kind of on the front end of what offense they're going to start doing and just start force feeding number ones, right? If I have a DeAndre Hopkins, if I have a Justin Jefferson, if I have a Devontae Adams, they need to see at least 15 targets a game. So, and because of that, the production for Justin Jefferson was crazy. I mean, that Bills game alone, he is the reason that, and then, Josh Allen fumbled the ball at the 1 yard line. That's the reason Minnesota wins that game. And so many different times this year, Justin Jefferson was the difference. Third and whatever it was. Kirk's kind of low-key heaving up a prayer, and Justin Jefferson's there to answer it. So, yeah, absolutely a stud. Tyreek Hill, not a bad option here. But again, I think Tua, when he was out of the lineup, the production did go down, and that's a little bit of a separating factor. Then you got Travis Kelce, who, became the number one wide receiver for the Chiefs. I know he's a tight end, but he became their X. He became their possession guy. When they needed a big play, it was Travis Kelce, and then they kind of sprinkled in, a Miko Hardman, a Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS, all these other guys as tertiary options off of what Travis Kelce brought to the table. And obviously his numbers are gaudy. Again, none of these 3 players are bad. So it's not like I'm saying of these 3 superstars, which one sucks the most. It's just which one this year had the most insane production. I think that was Justin Jefferson. He was flirting with that 2,000 yard mark for a reason. So big ups there to Justin Jefferson. Moving over to the defensive side, this is another one that I got right in my preseason picks. Nick Bosa, to me, I just saw a guy who, one, was going to be playing a lot of primetime games. That does, unfortunately, play a factor. We should just be picking the best defensive player, the best offensive player, but national audiences, obviously, this allows more people to get eyes on him, so that does play a factor, unfortunately. But he was just, he's the NFL league leader in sacks, up there in hurries, up there in pressures, and on the best defense in the league. So all that kind of culminates into one hell of a resume for Nick Bosa. And even in games where he didn't get sacks, again, going back to pressures and hurries, he was making an impact there. I think it was 2 weeks ago. He had no sacks, but 8 hurries, things like that. He has a huge impact on the game. And this is also a 49ers defensive line that, this is not the same D-line that went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago and lost to the Chiefs. It's kind of Nick Bosa's D-line, and they're figuring out what else they can do and how else they can generate pass rush. But Nick Bosa is carrying a heavy workload there. This felt like Micah Parsons' award to win mid-season. I'd have to go back and watch my mid-season version of this video, but I honestly probably said something like that they should close the betting market. This is Micah Parsons' award to win, because it felt that way. But then over the last 4-6 weeks of the year, you started to hear a whole lot less of Micah Parsons, and that's even more surprising when you compound the fact that Dallas, outside of the Green Bay game, pretty much had him moved to edge full time. So to see the production dip is a little disappointing. So something I hope to see change in the postseason. And Micah Parsons is still a freak. So being the runner-up here is no shame. And he's got plenty of years in his career where I think eventually he will win one of these. And then Myles Garrett here at 3. Again, one of those players that's, towards the top of the league in sacks, hurries, pressures. And like Nick Bosa, he was the defensive line for all intents and purposes. He was the guy getting it done across the defensive line. They even sent Jadeveon Clowney home early to end the year. Defensive tackle group in Cleveland, something to write home about. Myles Garrett's a huge reason why. If they got pass rush on the quarterback, it was probably 99. And then honorable mentions here. 2 defensive tackles that I even thought about adding a 4th and 5th, but I didn't do that for the other one, so got to be consistent here. But dude, Sexy Dexy, Dexter Lawrence was a freak this year. And Chris Jones, kind of the same thing we're talking about with Bosa and Garrett. Chris Jones was the defensive line this year for the Chiefs. Sure, maybe George Karlaftis is starting to pick it up, and Dunlap is good for a couple plays a game, but when you got big plays, it was Chris Jones, his big man number 95 in the middle. So Dexter Lawrence and Chris Jones, huge honorable mentions there. And I think somebody that maybe we can consider moving forward, Jalen Phillips, I want to give him a shout here. End of the year with 70 plus pressures, 9 sacks, and especially second half of the year really picked it up. But his teammate Christian Wilkins, one more D tackle that I think would probably be number 6 here. That Green Bay game on Christmas Day, we showcased the speed that a guy that big can play with. And he was shooting gaps all year. He was great against the run, great pass rush moves as well. Production, against both those avenues, run and pass. So. Honorable mentions to those D tackles, Sexy Dexy, Chris Jones, and Chris Wilkins. Maybe we can look at Jalen Phillips being a dark horse candidate for next year, but Bosa, Parsons, Garrett. If any 3 of these guys win the award, I wouldn't be upset. But to me, I think Bosa has the most impressive resume. Long tangent aside, let's talk Coach of the Year. Again, another one that I got almost right. I'm going to go with Brian Daboll, but odds-on favorites are Nick Sirianni, who my preseason pick was Nick Sirianni. Again, I predicted the Eagles to go, win 13, 14 games to then get bounced in the first round, but as this is a regular season award, I do think Nick Sirianni has a good case to win it. But any of these 3 guys, to me, are deserving. So let me start with guys not named Brian Daboll. Kyle Shanahan. He has Brock Purdy as the number 2 seed in the NFC. Need I say more? But also this year, especially down the stretch with Brock Purdy, which is interesting, it felt like he found that balance of Kittle's involved, Elijah Mitchell when he came back from injuries involved, Christian McCaffrey's a big part of the mix. Debo was hurt during that, so maybe that helps, spread the sugar a little bit. But the way Shanahan's calling games right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Debo's getting his, touches as well. Brandon Ayuk had some big plays and big games in there as well. So it just felt like he found that perfect mix to kind of get everybody involved. Because, for a while for San Francisco, it was like you have a big Christian McCaffrey game, and then it's a big George Kittle game, and then it's a big Debo game, and then it's Brandon Ayuk winning you that one. This year, especially down the stretch, it felt like everyone was in the mix. Again, Debo was hurt during that, so a bit of an asterisk there. Nick Sirianni, number 1 seed in the NFC. Both his coordinators are getting head coaching interviews. And again, he's the odds-on favorite right now to win Coach of the Year. So he was my preseason pick, and if he does win it, I totally understand. This is the one area where I'm not going so chalky. Every other pick was kind of chalk. But to me, Brian Daboll, dude, no team making the playoffs surprised me more than the Giants. Even Seattle. I predicted Seattle to win 4 games this year, but they got it as the 7th seed. The Giants are the 6th. So there's your bump right there. But also, the reason I didn't see Seattle being very good is I didn't anticipate a career year out of Geno Smith. He's our comeback player of the year for a reason, so I want to give credit there. Like I said off top, John Snyder, that draft class was insane. Those 2 rookie tackles were better than I anticipated. Kenneth Walker was the real deal. And it all kind of came together in this perfect storm, a little bit of a down year in the NFC, specifically in the NFC West. And it got Seattle that 7th seed, and they also got some help from Detroit, right? Otherwise, that could have been Green Bay. But then Daboll leading this Giants team with, respect to Daniel Jones having a career year, but it's Daniel Jones all the same. He is not a franchise quarterback. So willing an offense that's led by Daniel Jones. Kenny Golladay is not a wide receiver 1 like they anticipated 3 years ago or 2 years ago when they signed him. They've been living off of Richie James, some Sterling Shepard big games, and they've just been piecing together week in and week out. Daniel Bellinger's had some big catches from this year. These names that you're not accustomed to have been carrying the load in the passing game. And then Saquon Barkley. Brian Daboll deserves a ton of credit for having used Saquon and gotten so much production out of one of the best running backs in football. They've kind of gotten Saquon back to where he was his rookie year and year 2 pre-injury. So, ton of credit to Brian Daboll. There is no reason the Giants should be in the playoffs right now. And I think a lot of that is just him changing the culture and him installing winning, kind of attitude and mindsets and, fixing a lot of the problems that were left over from the Joe Judge era. So, man, I am thoroughly impressed by what Brian Daboll's done. And if anything, it makes me so excited to see what happens when this offense has its franchise quarterback, has legit wide receiver talent. The offensive line's perfect, and pristine and cleaned up to completion. And what happens when Wink Martindale gets that shutdown man press corner and they get another edge rusher, another blitzing linebacker, whatever the case may be. This team was a lot better than I expected, and they still have a lot of holes to patch up, so this team's going to be scary moving forward. And to end things off, we get our MVP award winner. I'm going to go Patrick Mahomes. All 3 of these guys, I think, deserved it. There is an argument for Jalen Hurts here, especially considering the 2 games he missed, they lost. But that being said, you bring value to your team by playing. So you missed 2 games, and I'm sorry that kind of does take you out of the running for me. That's the same kind of rationale I had with Carson Wentz. I guess God, what, a half decade ago now? That's crazy to think about. But same thing. You miss games and you're not bringing value to the table. It's easy to compare and contrast that way, but that's not bringing value to the table. Josh Allen's my number 2. Led the league in interceptions this year. And if not for that, I think there's a strong case for him to be the one. Also, the Bills didn't get the 1 seed because of the game being canceled on Monday night, that Bills-Bengals game, week 17. So that also played a factor. I think if the Bills are the 1 seed, it's easier to argue Josh Allen, especially considering, showed the big plays in the air. His running ability was well put on display this year. I just think the turnovers and the fact the Bills weren't the 1 seed kind of hold him back here. Patrick Mahomes, I believe, led the league in touchdowns this year. And anytime Kansas City was falling behind, Patrick Mahomes was able to get them back in the contest. And also, consider Pat Mahomes' production this year with the fact this is the first year he hasn't had Tyreek Hill, right? Like, that's a huge loss to the offense. And the entire offseason, we were talking about Kansas City. What does that offense look like without Tyreek Hill? And because Patrick Mahomes is such a dog, it really, wasn't that big of an issue. I mean, obviously, they'd love to have Tyreek there, but they were able to live off of Travis Kelce, MVS, Juju, Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I think a big reason that's Patrick Mahomes. And I mean, Jared McKinnon, 9 receiving touchdowns. They just found a way. Ton of credit to Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid, of course, the, kind of engineers to the offense. But Patrick Mahomes went out there and executed. You still got those signature Mahomes crazy throws this year, too. So, yeah, to me, a good MVP choice. All 3 of these guys, I think, deserve it and played like MVP candidates, throughout this season. But that is going to do it for my 2022-2023 award predictions, picks, however you want to word it. Let me hear your case for who you think should win these awards down below in the comment section. Who's your MVP? Who's your Offensive Player of the Year? Who's your Rookie of the Year? All that fun stuff. And also, maybe what predictions did you make before the year that ended up being right? I'd love to hear what you had go your way and what picks you would make for these awards. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, a lot more football content coming to you this offseason. So be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. That is going to do it for me. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.